In the great kingdom of Nyandala, where the rivers sang and the golden sun kissed the land, there lived a man named Jabari. He was not just any man. He was the wealthiest in the kingdom, with vast lands, cattle that stretched as far as the eye could see, and a palace made of the finest ivory and gold. Yet for all his wealth, Jabari was troubled. He was of age to marry, but he did not want a woman who desired him for his riches. He had seen noblemen marry beautiful women, only to be betrayed by their greed. He longed for a wife who would love him for his heart, not his fortune. One evening, as he sat in his grand hall, watching the servants pour him fresh palm wine, an idea struck him. He would disguise himself as a poor man, a wanderer with nothing but the clothes on his back. He would travel across the villages, searching for a woman whose heart was pure. The next morning, he dressed in tattered clothes, smearing dirt on his face and arms to hide his royal glow. He took an old walking staff and set off on his journey. The people of the capital did not recognize him, for he had always been surrounded by guards and dressed in fine robes. For days, he walked from village to village, observing the people. Some treated him with kindness, offering him food and a place to rest. Others turned him away, looking down on his ragged appearance. One evening he arrived at a small village named Kamale. It was a humble place where people lived in simple huts and worked hard for their daily bread. As he walked through the village, his stomach growled with hunger. He knocked on the door of a modest home. A young woman answered. She was not dressed in silk or gold, but her eyes held a kindness that warmed Jabari's heart. "Good evening, traveler," she said. "How may I help you?" Jabari bowed slightly. "I am but a poor wanderer, searching for food and shelter for the night. If you have even a small portion to share, I would be forever grateful." The woman smiled and gestured for him to enter. "My name is Abeni. We do not have much, but what little we have, we share." She led him inside, where an elderly woman, her mother, was preparing a simple meal of millet and roasted plantains. Abeni handed Jabari a wooden plate, her hands gentle as she served him. "Eat, traveler. A hungry man is like a tree without water." Jabari ate in silence, observing Abeni. She moved with grace, her heart full of warmth. She spoke kindly to her mother, tending to her with care. There was no arrogance, no greed, only generosity and humility. That night, as he lay on a simple mat in the corner of their home, he realized this was the kind of woman he had been searching for. But how would he know if she truly cared for him, and not just out of pity? The next day he decided to test her heart. The morning sun filtered through the small hut, casting golden streaks across the mud walls. Jabari stretched on the mat, listening to the quiet hum of Abeni preparing breakfast. The scent of groundnuts and boiled yams filled the air. As he sat up, Abeni greeted him with a smile. "Did you sleep well, traveler?" Jabari nodded. "I have not slept so peacefully in a long time." Her mother, seated on a stool by the fire, looked at him with kind but questioning eyes. "And where do you travel to, son?" she asked. Jabari had expected the question. He thought quickly. I'm searching for work," he replied. "I lost everything to a fire in my village." Abeni's face softened with sympathy. "That is a hard burden to bear, but do not despair. Hardship does not last forever." He admired how she spoke with wisdom beyond her years. She did not ask if he had riches or great status. Instead, she treated him as a fellow human, someone in need of kindness. After breakfast, Jabari decided to put his test into motion. He would see if Abeni's kindness would last beyond a single meal. "I must repay your generosity," he said. "Do you know of any work in this village?" Abeni exchanged glances with her mother. "Work is not easy to find, but perhaps you can help at the farm," she said. "I tend to the crops each morning." Jabari agreed, and soon he found himself in the fields, his hands in the soil, planting yam seedlings under the scorching sun. He was not accustomed to labor, but he worked as best as he could, determined not to reveal his true identity. Abeni worked beside him, never complaining, even when the heat made sweat drip from her brow. She laughed easily, spoke gently, and worked diligently. Days turned into weeks, and Jabari stayed in the village, earning his keep by helping with farm work and small repairs. Abeni and her mother never treated him like a burden. They never asked about his past or questioned why he had nothing. One evening, as they sat under the baobab tree, Jabari asked, "Abeni, why do you care so much for others? You could have turned me away, but you welcomed me." She smiled, her dark eyes glowing in the fading light. "My father used to say that true wealth is not in gold or cattle, but in the goodness of one's heart. When you have little, you understand the value of kindness." Jabari felt something stir deep within him. He had found what he was looking for, a woman who measured wealth in love, not gold. But still he had one final test. One day, he pretended to have fallen ill. He lay weakly on the mat, groaning softly. Abeni rushed to his side, her hands cool, on his forehead. She prepared herbal remedies and fed him warm broth, staying up through the night to watch over him. Her concern was real. She did not hesitate, did not grow weary of helping a man she believed had nothing to give in return. That was when Jabari knew she was the one. But now he faced a new problem. How would she react when she learned the truth? Jabari could no longer deny his feelings. He had fallen deeply in love with Abeni. Her kindness, her wisdom, and her humility had shown him what true beauty was. But the time had come to reveal the truth. That evening, as the village prepared for the harvest, Jabari sat outside the hut deep in thought. The festival was the biggest celebration of the year, filled with music, dancing, and feasts. It would be the perfect moment to reveal his identity. But a troubling thought lingered in his mind. Would Abeni feel betrayed? Would she think he had tricked her? As the moon rose, the festival began. The villagers gathered in the open square where drums echoed through the night. Women danced in bright-colored wraps, and men clapped to the rhythm. Children ran around laughing and playing. Abeni was among them, her laughter light and carefree. She wore a simple but beautiful blue dress, her hair braided with delicate cowrie. Shells. Jabari watched her from afar, his heart pounding. He had never been nervous before, not in war, not in business, not even when facing powerful rulers. But now, standing before the woman he loved, he feared rejection more than anything. Steeling himself, he walked toward her. "Abeni," he called gently. She turned, her smile warm. "Yes? There is something I must tell you." His voice was steady, but inside he was uncertain. She noticed the seriousness in his tone. "What is it?" Jabari took a deep breath. "I have not been honest with you. I am not a poor wanderer." Abeni frowned slightly, confusion crossing her face. He continued, his heart racing. "My name is Jabari, and I am the wealthiest man in Nyandala. I came here in disguise, searching for a woman who would love me for who I am, not for my wealth." Abeni's expression remained unreadable. Silence stretched between them, and for the first time Jabari feared he had made a terrible mistake. Finally she spoke. "So, everything you told me was a lie?" "No," Jabari stepped closer. "Only my name and my status. But my feelings, my love for you, those are real." Abeni looked away for a moment, her brows furrowed in thought. Then she turned back to him. "So if I had not taken you in, if I had turned you away, would you have thought me unworthy?" Jabari hesitated, realizing the flaw in his test. He had come searching for love, but in doing so had judged those who might not have had enough to share. "I never meant to test your goodness," he admitted, "but I had to know if your heart was true." Abeni studied him, her deep brown eyes filled with emotion. "Jabari, I cared for you when you had nothing. Do you think your wealth changes that?" He shook his head. "No, but I feared that if I had come as a rich man, I would never have known if your love was real." Abeni sighed, then smiled softly. "You were a fool, but your heart was in the right place." Jabari felt a rush of relief. "So, will you forgive me?" She laughed, the sound like a melody. "You do not need my forgiveness. But if you truly love me, there is one thing I ask of you. Anything." She met his gaze. "Promise me that, no matter how rich or powerful you are, you will never forget the value of kindness." Jabari reached for her hand, holding it gently. "I swear it." And as the drums played on, they danced beneath the stars. One a wealthy man, one a humble woman, bound by love that no gold could buy. As the festival carried on, the village celebrated with laughter, dancing, and feasting. The people of Kamalé were simple but joyful, their spirits unburdened by greed or wealth. For the first time in his life, Jabari felt something richer than gold. He felt at home. He held Abeni's hand as they danced under the moonlight. She moved with grace, her smile bright, her laughter free. Though she had accepted his truth, Jabari sensed that she was still processing it. He knew he had to prove to her that his love was not just words. The next morning, he made his decision. It was time to return to his true life. As the village woke, Jabari stood outside Abeni's home, watching as she fetched water from the well. Her movements were fluid, effortless, as if she belonged to the rhythm of the land itself. "Abeni," he called softly. She turned, balancing the clay pot on her hip. "Yes?" "It is time I leave." She looked at him for a long moment, and though she did not seem surprised, her eyes flickered with something. Sadness, perhaps. "I understand," she said quietly. "The kingdom awaits its wealthy man." Jabari took a step closer. "I do not wish to leave without you." She smiled, though there was hesitation. "Your world is different from mine, Jabari. I am a village girl. I do not belong to a palace." "You belong wherever your heart is," he said, "and my heart is with you." Abeni lowered her gaze, deep in thought. She had grown fond of him, not because he was rich, but because of who he was when he was just a simple traveler. But now she was faced with a choice. Could she truly step into a life of luxury and power, leaving behind everything she had known? "Come with me," Jabari pleaded. "Be my wife." She looked at him, and then, after a moment that felt like eternity, she nodded. "I will go with you," she said, "but only if I can still be myself." Jabari smiled. "That is all." "I ask." By midday, the village gathered to bid them farewell. Abeni's mother embraced her daughter, whispering words of blessing. The elders wished them well, and the children ran after them as they left the village. As they journeyed back to Nyandala, Jabari arranged for a grand entrance. When they arrived at the gates of his estate, Abeni's eyes widened in awe. She had never seen such wealth: golden statues, lush gardens, servants waiting to greet them. But she did not react with greed or hunger for riches. Instead, she turned to Jabari and whispered, "This is too much." He smiled and squeezed her hand. "You will get used to it." But deep down, Jabari knew that wealth had the power to change people. He had spent his life watching greed destroy even the noblest of hearts. Would Abeni remain the same, or would the luxury consume her? As they stepped into the grand hall, the palace doors closing behind them, Jabari realized their true journey was only beginning. Abeni stepped into the grand palace of Nyandala, her bare feet brushing against marble floors, her eyes tracing the high golden arches and silk-draped walls. Servants in fine robes bowed as they passed, and the scent of exotic oils filled the air. Jabari had grown up in this world, surrounded by wealth and power. But Abeni, she had only ever known the simplicity of village life. She held on to Jabari's hand, her grip tightening. "This does not feel real," she whispered. He turned to her, his gaze gentle. "It is your home now." But not everyone in the palace welcomed her. Among them was Jabari's chief advisor, Otieno, an older man with sharp eyes and a tongue like a blade. He had been with Jabari's family for years, managing affairs of the estate, and he did not approve of this village girl. "My lord," Otieno said as he bowed before Jabari. His eyes flickered toward Abeni, his expression unreadable. "The council awaits your presence. They have heard rumors." Jabari straightened. "What rumors?" Otieno's lips twitched in amusement. "That their great leader has returned, with a commoner as his bride." Abeni felt a sting at those words, but she remained silent. Jabari's jaw clenched. "Abeni is not a commoner. She is my chosen wife." Otieno bowed slightly, but did not hide his skepticism. "As you say, my lord." Jabari felt Abeni's discomfort, so he led her away from the prying eyes of the court. He showed her the private gardens, where the sound of flowing water calmed the soul. "Do not let them shake you," he said. "They will learn to respect you." Abeni looked at him, uncertainty in her eyes. "And if they do not," Jabari's voice was firm, "then they will answer to me." But deep down, Abeni knew respect could not be forced. It had to be earned. Days passed, and whispers spread through the palace. The noble women eyed Abeni with judgment, their silk robes rustling as they gossiped in the corridors. The servants, uncertain whether to treat her as their equal or their mistress, kept their distance. Yet Abeni did not complain. She did not demand jewels or grand feasts. She did what she had always done. She helped where she was needed. She woke before sunrise to walk through the marketplace, speaking with farmers and merchants. She visited the kitchens, rolling up her sleeves to prepare meals. She sat with the palace healers, learning the medicinal properties of rare herbs. People began to notice. "She does not behave like a queen," the nobles scoffed. "She does not behave like a stranger," the servants murmured. Even Otieno, ever watchful, had to admit, this village girl was not as weak as he had thought. But not all accepted her so easily. One evening, as Abeni walked through the courtyard, a noblewoman named Safia approached her. She was tall, elegant, and had once hoped to be Jabari's wife. "You do not belong here," Safia said, her voice smooth as honey but laced with venom. Abeni met her gaze calmly. "Jabari says otherwise." Safia smiled coldly. "You may have his heart now, but wealth changes everything. Let us see if love alone can keep you in this palace." Abeni did not respond, but she understood the warning. The world of the rich was dangerous, filled with power struggles and silent battles. She had won Jabari's love, but could she win the kingdom's? Days passed, then weeks, and though Abeni remained strong, she could feel the weight of the palace pressing down on her. She had grown up in a world of honesty and simplicity, but here in the halls of Nyandala's wealthiest estate, she was surrounded by whispers, jealous glances, and carefully veiled insults. She was not blind to it. She knew that many of the nobles disapproved of her. The women envied her place at Jabari's side, and the men saw her as an unworthy bride. But she had made a promise to Jabari, not just to be his wife, but to remain true to herself. One afternoon, while walking through the palace gardens, she overheard two maids whispering behind a mango tree. "Did you hear? Some say Lord Jabari regrets marrying a village girl." Abeni's steps faltered, but she forced herself to keep walking as if she had not heard. "Why wouldn't he?" the second maid replied. "He could have had a noblewoman, someone from a powerful family. Instead, he chose a girl who used to dig in the dirt." Abeni's heart tightened, but she did not stop. She had endured worse before. Later that evening, she found herself sitting beside Jabari in the grand dining hall, where a feast had been prepared for visiting noblemen. The table was lined with roasted meats, golden platters of fruit, and cups overflowing with palm wine. Servants moved swiftly, refilling goblets and clearing plates. Jabari, dressed in his finest robes, sat at the head of the table, listening as the noblemen discussed trade routes and new business ventures. Abeni sat quietly beside him, observing, learning. Then one of the noblemen, a wealthy trader named Theodisa, leaned forward and smirked. "Lord Jabari, forgive me, but I must ask, how does a man of your status find life with a woman who knows nothing of wealth?" The hall grew quiet. Abeni felt the eyes of the room shift toward her. Jabari's expression darkened. "I did not marry Abeni for wealth. I married her for her heart." Adisa chuckled. "Ah, but love is a fickle thing, my lord. A man must think beyond the heart. A wife should bring fortune, connections, and strength to a household." Abeni, who had remained silent through most of the evening, finally spoke. Her voice was calm but firm. "Tell me, Lord Adisa, how does a fortune keep a man warm at night? How does gold comfort him when he is troubled? Do riches whisper words of encouragement when he is lost?" Adisa raised an eyebrow. "No, but they ensure power." "And what is power without wisdom?" Abeni countered. "A foolish man. With gold is still a fool." The room fell silent. A few of the noblemen smirked behind their goblets. Others stared at Abeni, surprised by her sharp words. Jabari turned to her, admiration shining in his eyes. He knew then that Abeni was no ordinary woman. She had not only won his heart, but had the strength to stand among those who doubted her. But as he reached for her hand beneath the table, he saw something in her eyes, a quiet pain. She was strong, but she was also tired. That night, as they lay in their chamber, Abeni finally spoke what had been weighing on her heart. "Jabari, I do not belong in this world." He frowned, turning to face her. "Why would you say that?" She sighed. "Every day I feel like an outsider. No matter how much I try, they will never see me as their equal." Jabari took her hands in his. "I do not need their approval. I need you." She smiled sadly. "But I need to feel like I am more than just your wife. I need to find my place here, not as a noblewoman, not as a trophy, but as myself." Jabari understood. He had taken her from her world and placed her into his, without giving her a chance to grow into it. "What do you need?" he asked gently. She met his gaze with quiet determination. "Give me time. Let me prove that I can be more than just the woman you married." Jabari nodded. "Then take all the time you need and know that I will always stand by you." But deep in his heart he worried, would love alone be enough to keep her in his world? The following days brought a change in Abeni. She no longer spent her time wandering the palace halls, waiting for acceptance from those who refused to give it. Instead, she took action. She woke before dawn and walked into the kitchens where the cooks prepared meals for the palace. The head cook, a plump woman named Mama Della, was surprised to see her. "My lady," she said, bowing slightly. "What brings you here?" Abeni smiled. "I want to learn." Mama Della blinked. "Learn? But you are the master's wife. You do not need to cook." Abeni shook her head. "If I am to live here, I must know more than how to sit at a grand table." The kitchen staff watched in awe as Abeni rolled up her sleeves and helped grind spices, knead dough, and stir the bubbling pots over the fire. She listened, asked questions, and learned about the trade routes that brought ingredients from distant lands. The same day she visited the palace weavers, where fine silks and garments were created for the wealthy. Instead of simply admiring the fabrics, she sat with the weavers, learning how the threads were dyed and woven. Each day she sought to understand a new part of palace life, not as an outsider looking in, but as someone determined to be part of it. Word spread quickly. Servants whispered about the unusual mistress who did not behave like royalty. Some respected her efforts. Others thought it foolish. But one person who did not approve was Otieno, Jabari's chief advisor. One evening he approached Jabari in the grand hall, his expression disapproving. "My lord," he said carefully, "there is talk among the people. They say your wife, she is behaving more like a servant than a queen." Jabari arched an eyebrow. "And why should that concern anyone?" Otieno sighed. "Because the nobles will not respect a woman who does not act like one of them. Power is about perception, my lord. If they see her as lowly, they will see you as weak." Jabari clenched his jaw. "Abeni is stronger than any of them." Otieno folded his arms. "Perhaps, but strength alone does not win loyalty. A queen must inspire fear or admiration, not confusion." Jabari knew Otieno was trying to protect him, but he also knew that Abeni's heart was pure. Later that night he found Abeni sitting in the palace gardens, staring at the moonlit sky. He sat beside her. "Otieno came to me today." She glanced at him. "Let me guess. He is worried that I am embarrassing you." Jabari sighed. "He does not understand you." Abeni smiled faintly. "Few people here do." He took her hand in his. "You do not have to prove anything, Abeni. Not to them." She turned to him, her gaze firm. "I am not proving anything to them. I am proving something to myself." Jabari fell silent, understanding. She was not trying to win over the nobles. She was trying to find her place, not just in the palace, but in a world that had never been hers. But while Abeni worked to carve a space for herself, others were plotting against her. That night, in the shadows of the palace, a meeting took place. Safia, the noblewoman who had once hoped to marry Jabari, stood in a candle-lit chamber, speaking in hushed tones to Otieno and a few other nobles. "She does not belong here," Safia said coldly. "She is turning the palace into a marketplace. If we allow this to continue, we will lose our power." Otieno stroked his beard. "Lord Jabari is blinded by love. He will not listen to reason." "Then we must open his eyes," Safia said with a smirk. The nobles leaned in closer. Plans were being made. Abeni had fought against whispers and judgment, but now she was about to face something far more dangerous. A trap was being set, and soon she would have to fight for more than just her place in the palace. She would have to fight for her very survival. The trap was set carefully, woven like a spider's web, silent, invisible, and deadly. Abeni was unaware of the growing storm against her. Each day she continued to learn, to work, to build trust with the servants and merchants of the palace. Slowly, the common people began to see her as one of their own. But for the nobles, this was a threat. One evening, as the sky burned orange with the setting sun, a messenger arrived at the palace gates bearing urgent news. "My lord," the man said, bowing before Jabari, "there is a crisis in the western villages. The granaries have caught fire and the people are starving." Jabari stood at once. "Summon my best men. We ride at dawn." Abeni, standing at his side, touched his arm. "Let me come with you." He shook his head. "The journey is dangerous. Stay here." She wanted to argue, but she saw the determination in his eyes. "Be careful," she said instead. Jabari kissed her forehead. "I will return soon." As the next morning arrived, Jabari and his warriors rode out, their banners high against the rising sun. And as soon as he was gone, Safia and her allies struck. The attack was subtle at first. Rumors began spreading through the palace. The master is away and his village wife makes decisions in his absence. She gives orders to the servants as if she were queen. She is planning to take control of his wealth. Within a day, whispers turned into murmurs, and murmurs turned into fear. Otieno, ever cunning, called a council meeting, inviting the nobles and palace elders. He stood at the center of the grand hall, his voice grave. "My friends, Lord Jabari is gone, and already we see his wife acting beyond her place." The nobles nodded, some hesitantly, others eagerly. "She is not one of us," Otieno continued. "She was not born to power. She does not understand the ways of the court, and now she moves freely as if she is our ruler." Safia stepped forward, her voice smooth as silk. "We must ask ourselves, does she truly love Lord Jabari, or has she played a clever game, to rise from nothing to wealth?" The nobles murmured in agreement. The seeds of doubt had been planted. By nightfall, the trap was sprung. Abeni was in her chambers when the guards stormed in. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded as they surrounded her. Otieno stepped forward, his face unreadable. "Lady Abeni, you are accused of plotting against Lord Jabari. You have been seen gathering influence, speaking with the merchants and making decisions in his absence." She stared at him in disbelief. "I was only helping." Otieno's expression remained cold. "Helping? Or preparing to rule alone?" Abeni's heart pounded. She looked at the guards, at the nobles watching from the doorway. Safia stood among them, her lips curled into a small, satisfied smile. "This is madness," Abeni said. "Jabari would never believe such lies." Otieno tilted his head. "Perhaps, but he is not here, and until he returns you will be placed under guard." Abeni's stomach twisted. She knew what this meant. They wanted her out of the way. Two guards grabbed her arms, pulling her from the chamber. She did not resist. Fighting now would only confirm their lies. As they locked her in a small room at the far end of the palace, she sat in the darkness, her mind racing. They had underestimated her. She had survived hardship before, and she would survive this too. But she had to act fast, because if Jabari did not return in time, she might not live to see him again. Days passed in cold silence. Abeni sat in the dimly lit chamber, her mind sharp despite her confinement. She was not a queen locked away in a tower, helpless and waiting to be saved. She was a woman of the earth, raised in hardship, molded by struggle. And if there was one thing she knew, it was survival. She had spent her life watching how power worked, not through grand speeches or crowns, but through alliances, through trust. She knew she still had allies in the palace, the common servants, the cooks, the merchants, those who had seen her work alongside them, those who had spoken to her as an equal. She had to get word to them. One evening, as the guard outside her door changed shifts, Abeni heard a faint tapping on the wooden wall. She stilled, listening. Then a whisper came through the crack near the door. "My lady, are you well?" It was Mamadella, the cook who had once taught her how to grind spices in the palace kitchen. Abeni's heart swelled with hope. "Mamadella, listen carefully. I need you to carry a message." The old woman hesitated. "It is dangerous, my lady." "I know," Abeni said firmly. "But if we do nothing, they will turn everyone against me. I need you to spread the truth." Mamadella was silent for a moment. Then she whispered, "What must I do?" The next morning, the palace kitchen was filled with hushed voices. The servants spoke in careful tones, their hands working swiftly over pots and trays. "They say she plotted against Lord Jabari," one whispered. "They are lying, Mamai," Della said sharply. "I have seen her kindness. Have you ever known her to be greedy? Have you ever seen her take anything for herself?" The servants exchanged looks. No, they had not. "She was one of us," Mamadella continued. "She worked beside us, never above us. Do you truly believe she is capable of betrayal?" Doubt flickered in their eyes. The rumors had come too quickly, too conveniently, and now another whisper began to spread, not of Abeni's betrayal but of treachery against her. "While you seek power for yourselves, she serves others." His voice lowered, sharp as a blade. "And that is why you fear her." Safia's face darkened, her perfect mask slipping. Otieno's lips pressed together. Jabari stepped forward. "Hear me now, Abeni is my wife. The woman I chose, the woman I will always stand beside." He let his words sink in. "Anyone who questions that questions me." His final words were a warning. The nobles knew then they had lost. Jabari turned to the guards. "Otieno and Safia have betrayed my trust. They will no longer serve in my house." Otieno's eyes widened in shock. "My lord, you cannot mean—" Jabari's voice was ice. "Take them away." The guards stepped forward. Otieno and Safia had no choice but to accept their fate. They were escorted out, their reign of silent manipulation finally over. Abeni watched them go, knowing this was not just a victory for her, it was a victory for truth, for justice. Jabari turned to her, his gaze softening. "Are you ready to rule by my side?" Abeni took his hand. "I have always been ready." And as the palace watched, they stood together, strong, united, unbreakable. Peace returned to the palace, but the scars of betrayal lingered. Abeni had won her place, not through wealth or power, but through wisdom, resilience, and the loyalty of those who truly mattered. Days after Otieno and Safia were removed, the palace began to change. The servants who had once feared speaking freely now carried themselves with pride, knowing their mistress was a woman who valued their work. The merchants of the marketplace no longer hesitated to approach the palace, for Abeni had shown them respect. Even some nobles who had once doubted her now watched her with newfound admiration. Jabari saw all of this. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, he turned to her and said, "I was wrong." Abeni raised an eyebrow. "About what?" He smiled. "I thought you needed to prove yourself to them, but the truth is, they were the ones who needed to prove themselves worthy of you." Abeni chuckled. "That is not how nobility thinks." "Then perhaps we should redefine what it means to be noble," Jabari said. She looked at him, a slow smile spreading across her lips. "A ruler who believes in fairness. That is a rare thing." Jabari reached for her hand. "And a queen who rules with wisdom and kindness. That is even rarer." They stood beneath. The moonlight, two souls who had come from different worlds, yet had found something richer than gold, a love built on truth, trust, and unwavering respect. As time passed, Abeni became more than just the wife of a wealthy man. She became a voice of change in the palace, a leader in her own right. She continued to walk among the people, listening to their needs, ensuring that wealth did not blind those in power. And in doing so, she and Jabari built something far greater than a kingdom of gold. They built a legacy of love, a legacy of justice, a legacy that would be told for generations to come.